Hey everybody. Anybody out there raising money or know somebody who's raising money? No. If you have, you've come to the wrong place. No, just kidding. You've actually come to the right place. The panel we've got here, thanks to Dave and the Street Fight, is really impressive. And I think we're going to hear some very interesting things from our guests. So why don't we kick it off? Todd, do you want to just kind of go down the line? Give us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently focused on.
Sure, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Todd Klein from Revolution Growth. Revolution is a private equity platform headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we have three major components of what we do. We have a seed stage fund called Rise of the Rest, which is primarily focused on finding opportunities outside of the major venture centers. That's run by a guy called J.D. Vance, who you may know that name. He wrote a very successful book last year called The Hillbilly Elegy, and now he runs that effort for us. We have a venture fund, a series of funds that we manage, and they do mostly Series A and Series B types of investments, and then where I invest is in the growth side. So we invest somewhere between $10 to $50 million, depending on the stage of the company. We're managing now about $1 billion in capital. And my particular focus area is in the consumer and the media space, and that includes some of the tech that we'll be talking about here in a little bit.
I'm Howard Morgan. I'm the co-founder of First Round Capital, which is early stage venture capital based in Philadelphia with New York and San Francisco. I'm also chairman of a later stage fund called B Capital with offices in Singapore, Manhattan Beach, New York, and San Francisco. And we do a little bit of everything. B Capital is mostly enterprise types of things, B2B. First Round has done everything from consumer, we were the first investors in Uber, to healthcare, IT, and some health stuff as well, and blockchain. And we're kind of willing to look at almost everything from a napkin sketch on up.
Ooh, a napkin sketch. I love that. Hi, my name is Jillian Manus. I'm managing partner of Structure Capital. We are an early stage fund out of the Silicon Valley. We have offices in San Francisco and in Palo Alto. We call ourselves the architects of the zero waste economy. We look at underutilized assets and excess capacity. So we too were one of the first investors in Uber. We're also in Peerspace and Breather. WAG is another one we like a lot. Skills Marketplaces. One of our companies was just named one of the most innovative for fast company. It's called Hyper, which is a location-based marketing company. I sit on the board, and so that's why I'm participating in this group here. But we really do see data as, Jack Ma said, data is the new oil, and I absolutely agree.
Great, thanks very much. And I should point out, I pitched to B Capital in Singapore last year and didn't get any money. But thanks anyway.
You have to be.
So let's start with something pretty general and broad. What is local to you guys and ladies when it comes to your thoughts about investing? How do you characterize it in your minds? Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Well, since some of our focus really is on the consumer side, we start with the customer and then we tend to work backwards. And so that means focus on the values that today's consumer is making their purchase decisions on. Things like authenticity, local, experiential, those sorts of things. And so when we think about investing in this space, what we're seeing now probably for the first time, and it was interesting, the speaker before, Mr. Card, talked about some of these trends, but what we're seeing is what I would call the microization of omnichannel for smaller localized businesses. So many of the tools that some of the bigger consumer-oriented businesses have had the advantage of in order to create multi-channel opportunities, whether they're ordering or fulfillment and things like that, are now becoming available for localized businesses. And so, as it relates to, particularly on the consumer side for us, we're seeing a lot of that, and some of it's starting to create scale, and that would be a key focus area.
We look at local as the sort of agglomeration of many many markets, but with a common theme. So sometimes it's advertising and ad tech, which can get you to the local, and we have done a lot of investments there, including such things as AppNexus, where you've got the multi-billion-dollar type of opportunities. FanBank, which is helping merchants connect with their local sports teams to do local promotion. So national advertisers can actually get local promotion in individual local stores with connecting with the team structure. So local in that sense is quite important. But it's also true that as more and more commerce is online, the local's importance as driving you to a local store becomes slightly less critical. And so now you need to understand how the local merchants can become national. So it's a little twist both ways.
So I actually see local as being wherever your phone and you are. That is local. And I think that's where we're all moving. I know, then picking up what Howard said, is that the online, offline attribution is really where we're trying to figure it out, where we have companies, big companies like Alibaba and Amazon that are clearly taking over, and yet you have small companies like, believe it or not, like Nordstrom's is now perceived as a small company because they're unable to really gain and harvest the data from their stores, from the physical presence. And I think that's where we're trying to figure out. So I feel that local's not just, I think it's where the person is, not just where the business is.
Interesting perspective. It reminds me, in the old days when some of us used a buddy list, you would know if you were online, it would have presence.
Yeah.
Today with mobile, as we know, there is no such thing as presence.
Right.
Everybody's online.
Yes.
Everybody's always
Yes.
available. So you guys, and I will stop saying guys, you folks.
That's all right. I
certainly-
have a lot of testosterone.
You certainly must see a lot of interesting pitches. Probably see a lot of silly ones, but I'm curious about the ones that that you look at and think, wow, these are kind of way ahead of their time. Have you seen anything like that lately that would be of interest? Or maybe a category, if not a particular company?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of AR, VR now, where we saw from the Pokemon Go, that you can drive people to local places, even though it's a national company. And we're seeing a lot more people looking at that model and saying, how do we use AR to give people very local information as they're walking along the street, as they're moving in their cars, that will drive them to a merchant, whether it's a local merchant or a local outlet for a national chain. And how do we customize what we have in those local stores? We're seeing that as well for the local population, even though we're a national chain. I mean, at Costco, for example, which we think of as a giant, it is a giant national chain, but each store manager has flexibility to order things. So you get different things in Palm Desert, California, and in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. And probably 90% of the items are the same, but that 10% can make a big profit difference per store.
Yeah, actually, there are two areas. First, facial recognition, I see is definitely, because identity resolution of unknown customers is a big issue. So I think that we are looking at Visa. I mean, what Visa is doing, I just was at a panel where the head of marketing for Visa was talking about how it's all going to facial recognition. So we will be going into stores. We will no longer need Apple Pay or anything like that. It will be. And I think that is very interesting. It's almost catapulting Siri or complementing Siri, voice recognition. I found that's an interesting space, but then I'm also 5 steps ahead, and I think that was mentioned already here in terms of blockchain. And I know that that's an area that I'm very interested in. I just spoke on the healthcare applications of blockchain. And even though we're definitely at the very beginning of this, I think that this is going to accelerate at a very, very fast pace. And I think that's something we should be mindful as we are analyzing this data and figure out how to apply it. And then, one step further, how to share it.
I just add one thing there, because healthcare is almost always delivered locally. I mean, there is telemedicine for sure, but most of it is delivered locally. And we have out in the Bay Area Forward, which is trying to create a new type of clinic that you walk into using both advanced personalized medicine and keeping records on the blockchain, so you both get the privacy, the immutability, and the distributed nature of that. So I think when you have a service that's really delivered locally, that offers opportunities.
I agree with that. I think that's actually, I'd like to hear more about that company, by the way.
And the only comment that I would add is, if you ask when things maybe are slightly still ahead of themselves, we do get pitched a lot of businesses that, for lack of a better way to say it, represent the Alexification of everything. And I mean, I think obviously using voice commands and things like that versus written search and the like is part of a trend, but it's not necessarily yet attached to a business model, certainly one that's not separate from Amazon today.
Right. And you're seeing things that are more in the growth specter anyway, so it's a little bit more mature. So your philosophies, is there kind of one thing that if someone's pitching you, particularly on a local idea or a local business, something that kind of gets you to perk up and take note? Is there anything in particular that grabs your attention?
Well, what's always hard when if you're selling to local businesses, if you want them as your customers, reaching the SMB market is the hardest thing to reach. And so when I'm being pitched on those type of ideas, the question is always, what's your go-to-market strategy? How are they going to get to know you? How are you going to get to reach a lot of them? And there I perk up if they have an interesting idea of how they get to a lot of the type of merchant they want to. Because it's kind of understood how you sell B2B and how you sell big national players. But if you've got to sell, 5 million mom and pops, how do you do that?
Yeah. So one of the companies that we went into, which Revolution just went into, actually, JD, was a company called SheerShare. And that was very interesting in terms of the dynamics of that. I have a podcast that Gimlet Media produces called The Pitch. And some of you know it and some of you may not. But we found this company. It's a married couple. They're from Houston. And they basically is underutilized salons. And it enables stylists to basically, it's part of the gig economy, to work wherever they want, whenever they want, and to win-win for the salons with underutilized space and the stylists with these schedules that they want to control. The husband was, and one of the reasons we went into this company is because they understood the culture. And that's critical, whether it's the culture of a town and go deep into Houston or Dallas or Texas or whatever markets they open up. But they know the culture of the business. And I think that the local piece of it is really the understanding of the people, not just, right, it's the community, right, of whether it's the stylist community or the community of Brooklyn, It's so local is redefined many ways when we look at investing into a local market platform.
Can I pick up on two of those themes? So I would completely agree with Jillian in that, when somebody pitches us, one of the things that we're listening for is how they're approaching a market perhaps differently. And most consumers today, certainly the trend is less confidence in brands versus influencers. This is especially true of millennials, but it works its way across the demographics. And so influencers, traditional, what you might think of influencers, whether in social and other places, are now not completely supplanting brands, but they're having a tremendous impact on that. So people who know their local community and engage and activate the influencers and have methods for doing that, repeatable methods, that really does speak to us. And then the second piece is also related to this prior comment. When we think of local, we also think of this gig economy, right, where something like 6.8 million Americans supposedly in 2018 are working in flexible situations so they can scale up and down. Again, activating that kind of a workforce effectively is something that we pay attention to.
I think there's one other thing, which is that I'm an investor in Slice, where you have national advertising and marketing that drives local local commerce, which is your local pizza chain, because the three big chains, really only control about 30% of the business, and you've got the other 70% is all the mom and pops, but they don't have the ability to get online easily. They don't have the expertise. With Slice, they can send them the orders, but they can do the national advertising, the national aggregation.
It's also knowing back to the culture, and that's just, I can't explain that and
Knowing the
express that.
website again?
Knowing the culture, knowing the connection. That influencer piece is critical, and I'm glad you said that, because we all have to feel that that's really top of mind when we're looking at marketing right now. It's an entirely next phase of this, but we've got to connect to it. One of our companies is WAG. So it's a dog walking that SoftBank just put $350 million into. God bless them. We were one of the earlier investors in WAG, and of course, this whole dog walking communities. That is once again very local and yet very dispersed, and it's a matter of connecting everyone so that they feel part of a bigger community.
Yeah, that totally has proved itself out with local news, hyperlocal news. A lot of these sites that do well are the ones who are influencers in the community. They connect with the community, and frequently the ones that don't are distant or not even in the community sometimes. So absolutely, I've seen that proved out.
And have empathy for the community. Yeah. And give back to the community and build the community. And so it's not just extracting value out of a community, it's not extracting value, it's actually building up the location in some way. And I think that's a critical part of the success.
I think that's true. So we were the early investors in Dog Vacay, which is now part of Rover, yeah. and doing the meetups, in physical meetups and getting the physical dog lover community and the boarding, because that's in the boarding space, those players together, because people wanted to know who was going to be taking care of their dogs. They actually wanted to meet a physical persona. They didn't want to just use the marketplace.
Absolutely. I by the way, even though we're in a WAG, I do respect deeply Rover and Dog Vacay.
Yeah.
So local is certainly not immune to chasing shiny objects, and someone like me who's written about a number of these subjects is maybe guilty of sort of pushing some of these shiny objects. So I'm thinking of things like on-demand, which is my previous company was big into beacons and bots, same-day delivery, now augmented reality, perhaps VR. All of these finding their way into local companies. Do you find any of the sort of shiny objects, if you will, these categories kind of ultimately supporting a shift in the local marketplace, like kind of not going from a shiny object to something that's, something that's a real mover?
Well, certainly same-day delivery or last mile. So at B Capital, we're investors in Ninja Van, which is last mile delivery over in Asia, because they don't have the same infrastructure that we have in the States, and that has moved that part of the world from really not being able to do the kind of e-commerce that we do here, now to be able to fulfill and allow local merchants to put on their websites and be able to deliver to customers same day or next day, certainly, in a way that only the biggest players could do before. So what a lot of the both on demand and some of these services, the whole Amazon Web Services and Azure, is allowing local merchants to behave and have the same tools that the giant international multinationals have available.
Yeah, it seems like new location-based technologies, we'll call them that, come along, and before they find kind of market fit, startups find that they need to push them into kind of the merchant space, maybe before they're ready. Do you guys, Beacons is an example there. Do you have a way to sort of steer founders toward the best use of their technology? So they've got a technology, you find it very interesting. They say, we got to go down here to quickly earn some revenue, and you're thinking, no, the strategy is another direction?
So we've sort of a philosophy, especially because we work with, early stage companies, not on the napkin stage, but one stage past napkin. We look at, my philosophy, and maybe this is just mine, is that akin to what Salesforce. So one of our companies, Hyper, as I said, location-based cloud marketing, went through the Salesforce accelerator and learned a lot from that. And one of the strategies that they have, which we also try to adhere to and try to teach, is for companies to find what we call, or Salesforce calls, one lighthouse customer, right? And for us, for Hyper, it's Marriott. So Marriott, we are located, we geofence and 6,000 properties. And we made that our lighthouse, to have a lighthouse partner, one partner, proof of concept, be able to go deep and wide with that partner, learn with that partner. We have another company that partner with Siemens, and we have another partner company with Amazon. And so that's really, I think, a great strategy for smaller companies to really prove themselves and go deep, rather than what I think is a lot of companies that I see try to boil the ocean. So I always say walk in through one door and then explore all the rooms.
But it is hard. I mean, we invest in people because of their entrepreneurial skills. So we don't want to move them 90 or 180 degrees off their idea. That's counterproductive. We're not running the company; they are. And so we do want to make sure that we're supportive of what they're doing.
So nice to hear from VC.
Well, but I mean, it's really true. I mean, we can help them if they're moving at 20 or 30 degrees off of true north to get it to a better place. But if you're trying to move it 90 or 180 degrees, you're at odds with the founder, and that's not why we want to invest. We want to be with them for 10 years.
Yeah, I think we have a very similar philosophy that, you know, if we had a better idea, we'd be executing it, and we typically don't. What we try and do in that scenario, though, is to set standards. What does real proof mean? What does traction mean? How are you measuring it? Are you a hometown hero just getting some help, or do you have a partner like Marriott who, you know, is going to be very careful about the choices they make? If we can help them set standards and then be willing to iterate if things aren't going as planned and sort of enforce that discipline, then that's more the job that we should be doing, rather than saying, no, I think really it should be over here instead of over there. You know, if we were that good, we'd be doing it.
You know, I'm so happy to hear this, and by the way, I've never met either one of you gentlemen, but I look forward to working with both of you, and we definitely have investments together. But the Node Koshler said something a while ago. He said, you know, Jillian, whenever I sit on a board, I don't fight with the founder. You know, the board is not there to disagree. The board is there to help, to steer, to guide. But in the end, it's the founder that makes the decision, not us. And I thought that really resonated with me. And I know that's a bit off topic. That we serve the founder to make these companies successful. The founder really doesn't and shouldn't serve us.
Hear, hear. We talked a little bit about online to offline attribution. This is a big area that's still yet to be solved. I'm sure some people might argue with me there. Are you seeing some other big issues that are still unsolved in local? Any jump to mind that are maybe hurdles to local really taking off?
Well, first of all, I would definitely, you know, reiterate this online to offline. We have people talked a little bit about their portfolio. So we have a company called Kava, which is a fast casual restaurant with a few locations open here, about 65 open around the country. And, you know, in our home market, which was Washington, D.C., we have maybe 20 locations. And every time we open one, not only do we get cannibalization from the one that's nearby, but we get it from a bunch of different places, because some of the customers traffic up to 6 of the restaurants during the course of the year. So we don't know yet. We're still looking for tools to figure out where they're going, and if we put something someplace, what happens. So really identifying where all that takes place, I think the market desperately needs those kinds of tools. The other thing that I would say that's kind of interesting that may be somewhat beneficial to some of the local businesses, you know, we have another company in the customized apparel space, and they're a national business. They're the largest company in their sector. And in a few of the markets, they compete with one of their partners, which has 20 physical locations. So this is an e-commerce business partnered with another company that has physical locations. And what is fascinating is in the last 120 days, roughly, Google changed their algorithm so that now when you search for custom t-shirts near me, they come up before us, right? And that's actually for a local business, that change is incredibly
Good news
valuable.
for them.
What?
Good news for the
It is,
local.
it is good news for them. I don't know if that's a swipe at Amazon, frankly, or something else in a backhanded way. But so the SEO piece, which was mentioned in the prior panel and some of the research, is still super critical to these companies.
It's interesting you mentioned Amazon. E-commerce versus local commerce. Do you think Amazon's going to continue to sort of eat up Main Street, or will there be some sort of symbiosis? What do you think is going to happen there?
Amazon is certainly going to keep eating up Main Street in the same way that big box ate up Main Street, 20, 25 years ago, because the U.S. has an amazingly good distribution system, and consumers in the U.S. are amazingly price sensitive, much more so than when you get into Asia, where the distribution system has 4 or 5 levels, and people are much more locally focused. And some of it is in the areas of food and other places is because they have smaller physical houses. They can't store as much. They can't, you go to Costco and you bring back your, 60 rolls of toilet paper or whatever, and they can't store that in their houses there. So I think globally there's a lot of difference happening. In the U.S., Amazon is going to continue to do that, and the smarter local merchants are selling on Amazon. More than half of Amazon's sales, commerce sales, are not Amazon goods. They're goods from other merchants who list on Amazon. So thinking of Amazon as the marketplace as opposed to the retailer, Amazon as a marketplace is a help to local merchants who know what they're doing.
I'm going to take Amazon even one step further, because I think Amazon is absolutely going to be the big winner along with Alibaba. So you have those two as really the key drivers. But as Amazon is moving into everything, not only into the consumer goods, but also in terms of providing services. They're looking in healthcare right now, as we all know. They're looking in so many different other quality of life pieces that I think that's why Amazon is continue to grow. It's going to deepen into our lives, and ultimately, I was predicting the other day, I spoke on a digital health board. I really think that Amazon is not only going to provide high-level, low-cost insurance to their own employees, but I think that ultimately corporate America is going to underwrite our insurance, our health insurance, because they want the data. And Amazon right now is collecting massive amounts of data. And you talk a little bit about AI, that's what's going to drive all this. It's our behavior, our insight into ourselves, our buying behavior, our health behavior. And I think that's really, once again, the golden ring.
Yeah, with AI particularly, we use that at where I am now at Politico and News. We used it at Urgently and On Demand. Do you find that AI is finding its way into a lot of local technology?
Well, I think it's just starting to, because at the most local players don't have the ability to hire the players. I mean, hiring in the AI space now is impossible because the big guys are paying enormous sums of money to people. But they're starting to apply it in ways that help the local companies. So loyalty has always been an issue, and there have always been loyalty programs that everyone runs for small local businesses. We have Upserve and some others who do that. And much more AI is now coming as they can get the data. If they can get your credit card data, not just when you use it at their place, but where else you're using it, they can serve you better. And there's always one thing that we've shown in the U.S. is that most of the consumers are quite happy to give up a lot of privacy for a little better service. And because they're not as afraid as perhaps they should be. And obviously at Politico, one of the reasons they should be afraid. But but from a commerce point of view, I would much rather have both advertising or offers that are very relevant to me. And you get that with better and better AI mining what I'm doing in my life. So I do think we're starting to see more of that.
Todd, do you have a thought?
Well, I was just telling you the time.
Oh, okay. I'm going to put you on the spot. So, what do you guys think? What do you folks think is the next billion-dollar idea or concept or business opportunity in local? Or is there one?
I do think, I mean, there's a bunch, but I think what we're seeing in personalized medicine, as I was saying earlier, and having it delivered locally is the billion-dollar idea. Healthcare, remember, healthcare is the largest or second largest sector in education, the two largest sectors of the economy. And when you do anything there that is delivered, and education's delivered locally mostly, and healthcare is delivered locally mostly. So those are.
We were discussing earlier, I'm on the digital health board at Stanford, and I'm a Dean's Fellow at the medical school. We work a lot in terms of identifying how to move hospital care to home care. And I think that's really where the shift is. One of our companies we have is called WorkPath, and it mobilizes health workforces so that we can provide this care. And that's really where we're going in terms of, and I believe that the health in terms of investing in health is good for not only our country, but actually for our whole the dynamics of global diplomacy. And that's one of the things that we look at. We're not looking at just local, we're looking at local and how it's really going to elevate everyone. And I think that's an area of investment.
Well, so I too agree that out-of-clinic care is, key, but I don't want to just say what my fellow panelists said. I have to say something different. So the one thing that I would say, and it's not going to be a surprise to anyone, but if you look in the real estate space, there is a transition to creating places rather than just selling space, right? So you're creating environments. So things that WeWork is doing, things that a bunch of other shared workspace companies are doing and building to create environments, that's as local gets. And there's going to be billion-dollar companies, plural, in that space, in my judgment, because of the way in which real estate is managed and how it's changing to be a non-core function for many, many businesses. So as that stretches out from inside of the typical big company structure, you're going to see, in my judgment, plenty of local opportunities to create new types of environments for work.
And let me just say one more thing, because almost all of people focusing on local think about the millennial generation, but it's my generation, which is the aging U.S. population, which is the fastest growing, and home health, health aids, aids to the aging population to keep them living independently longer. There's a huge amount of technology now starting to be applied to that. It's an area I'm very interested in, both selfishly for myself, but also for my investors, where I think there's a huge billion-dollar opportunities.
Howard's going to live to 125 minimum.
Can I just pick up on the real estate tech? I think you're spot on. That's a very big industry. That is not only here in the United States, but that is globally. We work a lot in that space. Peerspace is one of ours. Breather is another one. Sonder is another one. Canopy. So we're heavy into that area. Because people, not only is it the real estate developers, but it's the owners of their own homes, of their own offices. One of our companies, Peerspace, which is really interesting, is taking businesses and it's repurposing it. So if you have a photography studio, right? If you have a recording studio, if you have a gym, a barber shop, you can actually put it on this platform to add revenue. And I think that's it's using that local spaces in order to better utilize the community, bring the community in to these spaces and use them in a more innovative way. And I do think there is a tremendous amount of underutilized space in the world that shame on us when we have people living in the streets, when we have people who don't know how to capitalize on their own homes or businesses. But we being investors and founders and funders, are being able to help people to realize their underutilized capacity and assets. And real estate is prime one.
I think I'm getting the hook here. Are we out of time? Do we have any time for questions? I'm going to take that as a yes. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Or would you rather wait till after we're through here and can talk to them at lunch? No questions? Well, this has been very insightful, very intelligent conversation. I really appreciate your time. This has been great. Thank you again. Appreciate it.